get too far.
Hi guys, how you going? So I did say at some stage I'll do just a brief video on the travels and how they're going and such things like that. So just to kick it off, I'm at Noangrub at the moment, camping in a great caravan park, but the flies are wild. Listen, it's okay though, they're not March flies, no mosquitoes, which is good. So there's just a few topics I thought I might touch on while I'm on the road. Give a brief explanation on why I'm on this trip. About 3 years ago I started planning to travel for a trip in retirement, which I was actually planning for about a year or maybe 18 months time from now. Myself and my wife, caravan, four-wheel drive, let's get out and see Australia and take as long as we need being retired. My wife got sick and with cancer, and after a long battle with cancer over a period of about 18 months, 2 years, passed away, which left me in a bit of a void. Myself and my wife did everything together, so suddenly I became, you know, a person. I felt like a person without purpose, and I almost felt like I didn't know myself anymore. This trip for me is really a healing trip. You know, it's a trip, it's a travel, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's a travel to visit you know, some of my areas of my past, and to catch up with relations that I haven't seen for years, see places that I've seen before but I haven't seen for many years, and visit all the parts of the country that I'd always planned to visit and take my wife to. But when I say healing, you know, it's really about discovering myself again. It's very confusing when you get when you lose somebody like your wife close to you, and everything you did, you know, was dependent on there. So I suppose in a very rough sort of way, you know, my wife was my purpose. That's pretty much what drove me onto this trip. So I'm not there yet. I'm even today I was still asking, you know, what am I doing? But it I can see that, you know, this is going to help me. So why the channel? Well, the channel had three purposes, I suppose. Was one, you know, for anybody else that may be in my situation, or anybody else that's plans on travelling on their own at my age, 64 onwards, and maybe with just the dog, such as me. Hey Barnes. It might, you know, be similar sight to them, because I had a look on YouTube and I couldn't find very little about the purpose and what I want to do, and travelling on my own. Somebody was doing this, you know, there's a few videos of fellas doing, you know, small trips and that, but nothing to the scope of what I was planning to do. So really I'm doing, you know, Sparky's on the loose type trip, but just me and my dog, and the end result, or part of the result of that is a healing process, you know, to really work, get some self-identity again. So the other thing was, you know, I've got some good mates that I work with, and good mates from the army, and I wanted to have a channel where they could see, you know, what I was up to. Friends and family, you know, see what I was up to, and also as a record for myself. So, you know, in 5 years' time, I'll have this fairly comprehensive record of this trip that I've done, or this trip that I'm doing. And YouTube channel is a perfect opportunity for that. I'm not in it for the money, and I don't think I'll ever make any money out of it. You know, and on the flip side, I actually quite enjoy, you know, doing it. So, a couple of the... So I've listed a few topics that I thought I'd talk about in this for, you know, for people's interests. I've just made a quick note. So while I'm travelling, that's pretty much what I covered. The vehicle. So I bought a new 76 series that I'd reviewed, earlier in the channel. I still think it's the right vehicle for me, although, and we're only early into the trip, we're only 6 weeks into the traveling at the moment, or maybe 7 weeks, but I think it's the right vehicle. But I possibly could have got away with, like buying maybe new D-Max and kitting that out. My concern is now I'm retired, and I've retired, probably 3 years earlier than what I planned, was to have a vehicle that's going to basically take me to the grave. So I didn't want to have to look at replacing a vehicle after 4 years of travelling of such, and doing some of the rough stuff, and that I want to use for another number of years. And I wasn't sure, I haven't seen any evidence of really long-term usage of the D-Maxes and Prados and such as to sort of measure against, whereas there's plenty of evidence that the 70 series of vehicles can cut the mustard. Many of them are up to 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 Ks with very little maintenance required if they've been looked after and still doing the job. But the vehicle's going well. Some things that I've done that I probably wouldn't do again. One would be I wouldn't install a second UHF radio. It's useful, but I think it was a bit of an overkill, because I could have bought myself a GME 5 watt or whatever handheld, and it would have done the same job for that second channel. I often have the second radio turned off, and I only have it turned on when it makes sense to have it turned on, whether on convoy or listening to caravanners and that on the road. They can get information, but most of the information that's of value as far as listening on a channel has come from channel 40, and most of that does come from the truckies, especially when you're passing truckies or you've got roadworks or these really wide loads. It's helpful to be able to communicate with the guides and such. Truckies have been pretty good. They can see a lot further ahead, and if I can get a copy on the truck in front of me, I'll just ask me, if he can give me a heads up when she's good to pass. And the same when I'm travelling a bit slow and I've got a road train coming through, I'll just ping them when I see them coming up and ask them to let me know when they want to come around, and then I'll slow down for them and move over the left to give them as much road as I can. So truckies appreciate it, and it's a good thing to do. Keeps our roads safe and keeps you safe. I do love the Cruiser though. She's a nice vehicle, and there's not much I did on the Cruiser that I wouldn't do. There is something I would have done if I was fitting it again. That would have been to remove the rear seats and have Drifter do a full setup, so I could use the storage where the seats are rather than having bags and they're sitting on there. I could actually have a little bit set up, especially for barns and for storing some camera gear and that. But that's neither here or there, and it's coping well. The Dot, I'm loving the Dot, and I always have. It's a great vehicle for travelling. However, for the long-term stuff like I'm doing, I think now, and talking to people and seeing people with these little off-road vans that some of them not weighing much more than a fully loaded Dot, I question myself whether I shouldn't have bought a small off-road camper, something like a Rhino Max. The reason that I didn't was, at the time, actually, when I bought the Dot, I wasn't expecting to do the kind of travel that I am doing now. And even then, when I thought about, travelling longer, I thought the Dot had cut it. But, geez, I can camp here. Do you want March flies with that? Man, the March flies, they were terrible. And I'll show that in some of the vehicles. But honestly, there's 3 free camps that I missed, that I ran past purely and simply because when I stepped out of the vehicle to have a look around, the March flies will carry you away. I was doing the old happy German slap dance, killing 3 with each hand at a time, and I still ended up with blood running down my legs from the March flies. I couldn't get to quick enough. Oh, geez, they were bad. So there's been 3 or 4 sites like that. So that immediately cut out the opportunity to stay in a free camp. And there was a couple of there was some more than a couple, there's quite a few free camps. That was the reason I didn't stay on the cliffs at at the cliffs camp too, because the march flies were terrible. The other thing is wind. Honestly, I didn't realise there was going to be so much wind, and what comes with wind is dust and sand, and it's been a real job trying to keep the dust and the sand out of the technical, the camera gear and such. And when the weather is ordinary, such as when it's raining or it's hot, you can't really sit outside and do what you'd like to be doing. We had a day that it was 42 degrees actually. I think it broke a record at Hopetown, just one day. All the other days are beautiful. But you didn't see anyone, and all I could hear was the air conditioners humming in the vans. That would have been an ideal day for me to jump into the van and do some editing, So getting out of the elements and getting into like what would be a room at home where you'd normally do your editing in your computer, film editing and photo editing and such. You don't have that, and not being able to get away from those elements was difficult for doing things that I really wanted to do. So would I take a camper again? No. At this stage, so many weeks, a few weeks in the trip, if I had the option again, I wouldn't take a camper. Whether, and I'm not just saying because it's the dot, pretty much most campers have the same issue unless you get a hard floor fold out. So if I was to do it again, and maybe even if I continue to travel once I finish this trip, I may even choose to sell the camper and my boat and buy a little 12-foot off-road van with toilet and shower, because the other thing is I've missed probably 4 or 5 free camps in towns for the very reason that I'm not self-contained. And they call them RV sites now, and they're very strict, and you have to have self-contained, you have to capture your grey water and such. Not that you have to have grey water tank, you just have to be able to capture it. There's missed opportunities there, because there's some days where you just want to stop and just sit down and do some stuff and take it easy. And it can be difficult to do that if the weather, the march flies, the bugs, the sand, the dust and everything isn't permitting. So it's not a major issue and it's not a showstopper, but in hindsight I probably would have been better off with a small van. Apart from that, the camp is great. It's got a great kitchen eating. I'm cooking another roast tonight actually. Put the charcoal barbecue grill. I've had to put the strand up, the ash is blowing around a bit when a big gust comes through, which is a bit frustrating. But because once again, no fires out this way, no fires and no anger up from October to May, end of May I think it is. So yeah, it serves all the purposes. It does everything I want, and if I was only going away for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, it'd be perfect. But it's not quite right for what I'm doing. If I wasn't editing videos and pushing a channel up, it could be a different story as well. But it does add a few limitations when you're traveling and trying to save cash by getting free camps and that, because you just can't get away from those elements. Anyway, enough of that. The selfie. Well, that's an interesting one. I am going to do an independent review on that, but very quickly. You need to understand how to use it, because I found on auto, I couldn't understand sometimes why I could have 2 bars on 4G and the selfie would be showing a full strength boosted signal, but I wouldn't see it on my phone. And one of the issues I found, and whether it's my configuration or it's a bug, is on auto it tends to stick to what it thinks is the strongest signal. But there's a 4G signal out there that comes up as H, which I'm not sure what it means. I think it must be like some sort of limited, Telstra emergency. but it won't run internet. And the cell phone would find a stronger the cell phone would find a stronger signal with the 4G and ignore the 3G. So what I have found that what I generally do is I'll have a look at the signal strength. I'll set it to 4G and I'll set it to 3G and have a look. And if 3G is the go, I'll manually set it to 3G. So it's a little bit of self-education, and when I get back I will talk to the guys about configuration. But when it's working, when you utilise it properly, it's really good. And I'm talking like a site where all I could do was send a text message, being able to upload a video once the cell phone was on. The only drawback is it hits the battery pretty hard, so you've got to be careful how you use it. But yeah, it's useful. Would I install it again? I can't answer that question yet. I'll have to wait till I finish the travels, till I've got 6 months or so under my belt to make that decision. If I was to make the decision now, I'd probably say no, but I really haven't gotten the remote stuff yet either. It wouldn't be fair to judge it yet, because the few times I have needed it, it's been very useful. Camps, now that's interesting. There's lots of free camps, and as I've already discussed, you need to be able to get away from the elements. So I've missed out on those opportunities. Caravan parks, they've pretty much all been as you read on WikiCamps. So I use WikiCamps nearly for everything. I do use HEMA a little bit, and a few other apps. Wiki, High Camp and such, but WikiCamps is my go-to, and it's pretty reliable if you look at the reviews. So that's worked well for me. There's only one stop, and I won't bring it up because I don't want to badmouth any of the so-called van parks that I stayed at. There was one that had average reviews, but it was terrible, and I'd never stay there again unless it was free or $5 a night. So camps went pretty well, pretty good. WikiCamps is pretty accurate on its descriptions, so I'll stick with WikiCamps. People on the road, this has been the win for me, and it's part of what I hope to have as well. But on the road, geez guys, you meet some of the most fantastic people, and you have pretty much every camp I've had a beer with somebody, and we've had a good old discussion. You start off saying good day, and before you know it, hang on, I'll just go and grab why don't you grab a beer and come and have a yak. And it's just not the old folk either, people younger than me as well. But you meet some great people on the road, and I find that somebody said to me once that, the people that drive in the big flash vans, they're too posh. But I reckon that's rot, because geez, I've met some great people on the road, had some great conversations. And the great thing about talking to people, for me, I need it because I'm travelling alone, and I'd be lying if I didn't say I got a bit lonely for company or conversation at times. So it's something I need, and if I have the opportunity to catch up and have a chat with somebody, I certainly will. I mean, Barnes is good, but he agrees with everything I say. He doesn't have an opinion. So people on the road, it's one of the highlights of the trips, I've got to tell you, is some of the old folk I brought from guys that rode a motorbike across the Nullarbor in '69 and went up the Birdsville track because it was a better road than the main road that went up to Uluru, to the likes of people that just bought themselves a big brand new van, and the kids have only just got old enough to leave home, and they're in their late 40s and they're on the road. All sorts of people, and it has been a highlight. And if you plan on travelling, make sure you say good day to people, because most people that are on the road, they got plenty to offer, and they love to have a chat and see what you're going on. A lot of answers from the dot, by the way. A lot of people have been very keen to come and look at the dot. And food costs, now that's a funny one. I expected my food costs to be the major cost for me and Barney to eat. Mostly because I tend to buy quite a bit of meat. Often I'll buy steaks that I won't eat, but I'll cook for Barney. Scotch fillets of that as such. But that's changed a little bit because, you know, Barney's actually more happy to eat what I'm myself, whether it be a stew or not, and he's dealing with it. And his crunchies, he's a real fan of his crunchies, which he always was at home. But you know, but I thought he might get a bit tired of them. So food's cost nowhere near as much. Food in West Australia is a bit cheaper than Queensland actually, but food has not been the cost I expected. The major expense is fuel. Fuel is extremely expensive, especially in the cruiser when I'm running it, you know, 15 litres per 100k with a 130 litre tank. If you're planning on travelling, guys, over-engineer your fuel costs, because that will become your major expense. Well, it's become my major expense. Camping, I should mention, for me isn't so bad because a lot of them have seniors rates. A lot of them, even if I stay in a caravan park, I take it up outside. And there's just me. If you're travelling and there's two of you and you've got a family, that's probably going to become your major expense. But for me, it's not a major expense. The major expense is fuel. I thought that would change when I started staying in places longer, but it doesn't, because when you stay somewhere for a period of time, you stay there because there's things you want to see, because you enjoy the location and you want to see, so you're burning as much fuel anyway when you jump in the, you know, in those days that you jump in the cruiser. I jump in the cruiser and I go to see something. Sometimes you'll drive 50k to look at something, so that's 100k you've done. You know, so I actually thought, the fuel cost appears extreme to what I thought it was going to cost, because I'm travelling every day trying to get to the West Australian border. Well, that's not the case. Since I've been over the West Australian border, I've stayed pretty much, I think the shortest stay I had was 3 days. I got 5 days here. I had, I think, 7 days at Hopetown. I had 4 days, I think it was, at Fowler Bay. So you're still travelling during the day to sightsee. So the fuel cost is a major cost for me, especially when you're paying $1.90 a litre. You know, fuel in West Australia compared to Queensland is damn expensive, I've got to tell you. That wind's blowing so hard, it's going to blow this camera away. But yeah, I was surprised. You know, even close, when I come really close to Albany and in Esperance, we're still paying, you know, in the $1.40s for diesel, and that's not premium diesel either. So overall, the trip's been going pretty well. I went to see my uncle and auntie's graves today, actually. They passed away. Well, my Uncle George passed away quite a while ago. My auntie Coral, not a great deal after that, 2012. But things like that is a good thing, because some of my family has passed away. A lot of my family hasn't. But my grounding and maybe, you know, getting some worth for myself is part of that. Will be about travelling the old haunts, you know, going to what I used to when I was younger, before I was married, and seeing the family. But the trip's going well. I'm enjoying it. It's had a couple of scary moments. I've learned a little bit more about long-term driving on country roads, especially in the rain. Barnes is going well. You're going well. Barnes just loves it. He just loves being on the road. Little fellow, as soon as he sees we're going somewhere in the car, he knows when we're packing up. He asked me at the car, and he'll just lay in the car while I'm loading up and getting everything hooked up, ready to go. He just loves it. So he's missing the beach a bit, because no England there's no beach, but there's plenty of open ground over the ovals and that, where I trust there's no 1080, where we go in the morning, the afternoon, he has a good stretch of the legs. Surviving's not easy. Survive well. I'm missing my daughter's cooking. I'm actually losing a bit of weight. But I've discovered a new love though. The old, I've got to tell you. Oh, can I get out? The old Emu Export. I always remember it was a good beer. But geez, I've got back into that since I've been in WA. the flies are bad. But apart from that, guys, thanks for listening. If you had to listen, if you got anything out of it, let me know. Like, I'm interested to see what the content, how the content's being accepted. I haven't seen a great deal of comments on that. Not from a large volume of people, but if the content's good and you're enjoying it, throw a comment in if you can. Anything that might help me, with the channel, and maybe get it a little bit more exposed, because I think the more exposure it is, the more opportunity is going to be for somebody in my situation that might be able to get something out of it. I'm really hoping, if nothing else, the channel might be able to help some other people that find themselves in my situation and want to find a reason to get on with life. Anyway, guys, if you sat through the how many minutes? Anyway, if you sat through, however many minutes this has been or is going to be, and you've seen through the end, thanks very much for listening to me. Throw some comments down if you enjoyed it. If you've got any recommendations for somebody that's travelling the country like myself, just me and my dog, or places that are ideal for an old fella to stay in and have a look around. I love my history. I love my military history. So if there's any places like that, guys, whack it in the comments, and I'll flag it in my travel itinerary, and I'll be sure to go and have a look. Anyway, guys, look after yourselves. Hope you're enjoying your Easter break. If you've got away, all good. Not having it for my daughter in Queensland because COVID kicked off and spoiled their plans. Look after each other. Have a few beers. This is a good time, a good excuse to have a few beers. And be kind to everybody. You'll feel better for it. I always do. Okay, guys. Thanks for that. We'll talk again. See yous. Hey, Barnes. Barnes is cold. Cold wind blowing through. I'm going to have to dish tea up. Get him into the camper. See you guys.